Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. So in this video I'm going to talk about a book which I recently read, and that is How to Be a Young #Writer. It's a book written by Christopher Edge, and yes, this is a very useful book for writers who are beginners. Basically they don't have much experience from writing, and they are just really beginners who want to get into writing. And I think this is a very useful book because it's not just filled with lots of words and words and words and words, yada yada yada. It has a lot of images, as well as it's not just fully content. He's giving us very useful tips in a very understanding way, because the way he says it are very short. He goes straight to the point rather than writing so many words to explain it. He goes straight to the point, and sometimes he's using images to help us understand better. And that's why I really like this book. I think it's an incredible book. It's really a useful book for young beginners. And in this video, I'm going to do a summary of this book, right? Now, if you're watching this video, you're someone who wants to get into writing. Same as me actually. I also want to get into writing because right now I'm practicing writing screenplays for movies, because I'm an aspiring filmmaker and I really want to write my own screenplays as well. So this book was really useful for me overall. How much I recommend it to people? I would highly recommend it to people, but here I'm just going to give a short summary of the book. So again, I'm not going to talk about everything in this book. Neither am I going to go in an in-depth analysis of the things said in this book. I'm just going to give a short and surface level analysis of some of the things said in this book, especially the crucial ones. So if you want to know some of these things in-depth level, I recommend you go to a library and borrow this book. If not, buy the book. I think it's a very useful book if you're trying to get into writing, and if you're new, definitely go buy the book. First thing he talks about is inspiration. Where do you get the inspiration from? How do you get the inspiration? Where can you look for inspiration? So here's what you can do for inspiration. Take a story. Can be a storybook, can be a movie, can be a show, can be any form of story, even video games, your God of War or The Last of Us, or even radios. If you're writing a story for radios, look at those stories, read those stories, and take certain elements out of them as inspiration, and add some twists and turns and make it your own. That's one thing you can do. And another thing you can do is, if you're going around, stop looking at your phone whenever you're on public transport or something like that. Look at your surroundings, alright? Look at your surroundings, look at how people behave, look at what's going on, look at what people are doing. And as ideas come into your mind, because whenever you're looking at things, whenever you're observing, sometimes there will be ideas that come to you, right? So when ideas come to you, you take your phone or a notebook, and then you start babbling down or writing down whatever inspiration you're seeing, so that you won't forget them when you're writing a story, because it's really easy to forget things, a lot of things. And also ask yourself some questions. Example, you see a crumpled paper on the floor. You can ask yourself, how did it get here? Who threw it? What was it used for? And things like that. So many questions you can ask. Set your mind free. Take inspiration from many things and then try to make the connections through certain events. Because that's how many writers create plots. They take inspiration from things that happen to them, from books they read, from movies they've seen, from shows they've seen, from radio, from whatever they have read. Basically stories that they know, and even stories of their own lives, or things that they observe, and they make connections, and that's how they form plots sometimes. Also write regularly. Even if you just have 5 minutes every day, just write regularly. Write every day. It's a very useful thing to do. Have a diary and write down things that you observe every day or things that you see every day, and take those things as inspiration, so that in the future when you're writing a story, you want to look back for inspiration, you can look back at your diary, things that you have seen, things that you have done, and then this could be interesting, and change things. Example, you are at this shopping mall or whatever, someone dropped their coin, right? You went to help them pick it up, but the person stops you and says that's my money, why are you stealing my money? And you're in a, holy shit, I'm in deep shit trouble, I'm in big trouble. You are telling yourself that, and then you change the circumstance. Maybe the person Maybe that thing might not be a coin, it could be something else, like a top secret things written paper, and you are going to go get it to help the person pick it up, and the person stops you and then he points a gun at you. Something like that, something along those lines. For writing personalities, look at yourself, look at your friends, look at your family members, look at people in the public, observe people, what they do and things. Okay, you want to write the external appearance of your character. How they look, how they dress, how they act and talk. Think about, could you use some of these things that you have seen observed from other people or yourself and fuse it into your character that you're writing, the external features. Like example, maybe a character could, whenever he gets nervous or things like that, he could, push his glasses up like this. Nervous, things like that. Don't take too much inspiration from real life. It could be bad if you take too much inspiration from real life. Do research on your story, okay? Do some initial research on the story. Maybe your story can be set in 1902 and who knows what was going on then, unless you are alive, which there's no way you are alive in 1902 if you are alive now. So do some research, think about how, maybe you're writing a crime story in the 1902. Think about how crimes were investigated in that timeline. Maybe look at this, fingerprints evidence were only used in the English court for the first time in 1902. So if you're writing a story before 1902, you cannot use fingerprints, and if you write that, then there'll be some issues with the story. So do some initial research, and then don't waste too much time doing some initial research, because initial research can take up a lot of time and if you are not being careful of the time. So what you can do is do a bit of it, and then as you are writing the story, continue to do your research. Don't spend too much time on the initial research. Get started on your story as well. It's important to get started on your story. Plotting and planning. Now there are a couple of different ways to write plots, right? Plot of a story. Different writers write it differently, but the two main ways that I've been reading about is that certain writers like Stephen King or Bong Joon-ho, they just let the story flow. Like they don't have a predetermined plan of the story in their mind before starting on it, or like a basic plan of the story before starting on it. They just, let it flow, free flow. They just write the story as they go along. And some writers like Rian Johnson would have a predetermined plan of how he wants the story to be, and yeah, that's how they write. So find your perfect way of writing, try different ways of writing and see which way suits you better. Thinking about your plot, think about other things. I'll put a picture here to show you what are certain things in this book written that you can think about. Avoid plot holes. What you can do to avoid plot holes is you can keep rereading your story and then think if certain things really make sense. It will create a plot hole or not. If it's a plot hole, then just try to fix that scene. Like for example, if somebody has an injured leg and then in the next scene he's dashing across the street, then there's something wrong there. So really fix your plot holes. Keep rereading your story, not just once. Once is not good enough. Keep rereading it until you can fix all the plot holes. Make your characters believable. Now there's a difference between making your characters likable and believable. But before you make your characters likable, you have to make them believable first. That's the first priority for characters. Make them believable. Give them character flaws. Make them fail in certain actions. Nobody can, be perfect at everything. Nobody can be like Captain Marvel, literally perfect at everything, or Rey from Star Wars. Nobody can be a Mary Sue, basically. So give your characters some flaws and some failings in their actions. Think about their motive and conflict as well. Why do they act the way they do? What do they want? What do they need? Need versus wants. Who or what is stopping them from achieving these goals that they desire? And try to give your characters some change as well throughout the story. A nice progressive change. It can be change from good to bad or bad to good, either way works. Good to bad can be Michael Corleone, a legendary character development from a young man who didn't want to be a part of his family mafia business to, by the end of the film, becoming the leader and the head of this mafia family. And throughout the entire movie, you see this literally legendary character development of his character, and it's just really incredible to watch. Walter White, a chemistry teacher who becomes someone who creates methamphetamine drugs, and really you can see his character progression, his development throughout the story. And then character profiles. I'm going to put a picture of it up here for a few seconds. You can take a look at it. World building. If you're writing a fantasy story, maybe drawing a map can be useful. And when you're building your world, right, try to have things in the world that will push the story forward. And try not to have any unnecessary things to the plot or the story of the movie or a show or a book or the story, basically the story you're writing. Alright, nothing unnecessary. Everything in the world building is necessary for the story. And keep it real. Try at your best to keep this world as real as possible. And this can be done by adding in details. And also be careful not to make the world too realistic, right? Now, choosing a viewpoint as a first person viewpoint and third person viewpoint. First person viewpoint is basically you're seeing it through the character's eyes, and this can be used a lot for horror stories, right? Horror, usually sometimes they will show you the viewpoint from the character's eyes, because it feels like we are the character, we are going through whatever horror the character is going through. So that's a really useful thing for first person viewpoint is very useful for maybe horror stories. Then there's third person viewpoint where there's a narrator in the background talking about what's going on. This can be used a lot in fantasy stories like Avatar: The Last Airbender at the beginning of the story. We have third person limited, which is basically the narrator telling the story from the viewpoint of one person. And there's also third person omniscient. Basically the narrator knows everything that's going to go on in the story. Yeah, getting your tone right. You have to get your tone right so that whatever emotions you want to evoke out of them, right? Example, you have this gritty crime thriller you want to write, but the tone of your story is too happy. That wouldn't work. Weaving your description into your story. So for readers, you have to, as you're reading something, you have to be able to imagine what the writer is saying with all those words. And description are very important for this. You have to bring each scene to life. That's what it's about. And if you're writing a screenplay, you don't write the descriptions of the scene very well, then you are not going to be able to film it very well either. So it's really important both ways. Now this is a quote from Stephen King about descriptions. Description begins in the writer's imagination, but should finish in the reader's. Basically the readers have to be able to imagine what you're saying. So if you're writing a movie screenplay, your director who's going to direct it has to be able to imagine what you're saying. If you're writing a story for a book, your reader needs to be able to imagine what you're saying. Show, don't tell. Okay, I think this has been used and said a lot for stories. Try not to give away too much directly. Make some things indirect to make the audience, put two and two together so that they can also feel engaged in the story. Creating a killer opening. The three key elements that are crucial to an opening are settings, character, and conflict. These are three things you have to introduce in the opening so that the audience will get to know more about the story you're going to tell. Like, let's take The Hobbit, for example. J.R.R. Tolkien begins with a detailed description of our main protagonist Bilbo Baggins, as well as the setting of the place he's at. And then he introduces the conflict of the story when Gandalf enters. In a film screenplay, you need three things most importantly as well. There are a lot of three things going on, but again, this is a summary. So these three things are the setup, the confrontation, as well as the resolution. The setup establishes the main characters and sets up the dramatic situation that will fuel the plot of the film. Like take Batman Begins, for example. At the beginning, Bruce, his parents died when he was a young boy, and this event inspires him to fight crime as Batman. The second part is the confrontation, the conflict that arises between characters mainly. Conflict and obstacles that the main character meets, the main character protagonist faces, that stops them from immediately achieving their goal. Take Toy Story, for example. Woody wants to be Andy's favorite toy, but then Buzz Lightyear comes in, takes away his Andy from him, and now somewhere in the middle of the film, Woody and Buzz get separated from their house, and they have to get back to Andy's house, and that's what the confrontation is. Then resolution. This is the climax of the story. This might be like a showdown of between the protagonist and their arch enemy or the antagonist or things like that. And yes, this is the most basic thing I'm going to talk about in this video about this book. definitely go check this book out. I highly recommend it for if you're if you want to write books, also check this book out. If you want to write screenplays, check this book out. If you want to write for radio, check this book out. If you want to write for games, check this book out. He's also, individually talked about these mediums as well. Okay, and this is a very useful book for beginners like myself, starters. If you are really very experienced, then all the things in this book is probably things that you already know, so maybe not for you. But if you're a beginner, definitely go buy this book. If not, borrow this book from the library. And yes, other than that, I have nothing else. Thanks for watching this video. If you like this video, click the like button. If you want to see more, subscribe to my channel. And thanks for watching. You guys are always the best.